Hey everybody, it is me, Chris Plant. I hope that you're having a wonderful holiday season. I certainly am, because I've given myself a little bit of a break. I wanted y'all to still have something new though, so I asked the folks who support this entire show, the folks at the Patreon, which bonus episode from the past year that they wanted to share. And it turns out they wanted to share the most recent one. It is a history of Pokemon, specifically the origin of Pokemon and the really 3 or 4 people most responsible for bringing it into the world. We go back into the 60s, into the version of the Tokyo exurbs that would inspire the creation of this game, all the way up until the years after the game, when they're immediately rushing into the sequels, into the card games, into the movies, into TV shows. It is a really interesting episode, and I learned so much about this thing that I thought I really knew all I needed to learn about while researching it. My guest is Brendan Bigley, the co-host of Into the Aether and the host of Wavelengths, 2 of my favorite gaming podcasts. He is a Pokemon expert, and he is such a great person to have joining me on this adventure. I think you're going to really, really, really like this one. And if you do, be sure to check out the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. This year, I'm doing something I would say a bit more wide-ranging and accessible, which is a history of the major anniversaries of 2026, starting with this one. Pokemon turns 30 in 2026. It was originally released in 1996. I have many more histories coming up, including a history of specifically 1996, why it might be the most important year in the history of video games, not just because of Pokemon, but because of a seismic shift in terms of who were the power players of video game culture, with Sega falling out and Sony stepping in. And my guest for that one are the 2 people who run My Life in Gaming, a great and long-running YouTube channel about the history of gaming and its culture. It is, and I'm biased to say this, a great time to be a subscriber. But if you're not, no problem, because you're about to enjoy one of those bonus episodes free of charge. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're having that great holiday. I will see you next week with a brand new episode about 2026. See you then. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. Oh, what do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup, just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special Patreon Post Games bonus video. In the past, we've done these videos where I teach you all about the history of games and media, which is really cool if you're a certain type of dork. which many of these people are, including my guest today. But I thought, let's do something that's a little bit more a bigger tent. Why don't we talk about the biggest tent of all, the Pokemon video game? So today I have invited my guest, Brendan Bigley, from Wavelengths, from Into the Aether, from a million other things. What am I missing?
NPC, Next Portable Console.
Thank you so much for being here, dude.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
We're going to talk about the first few years of Pokemon, how it came to be, how it landed in Japan and the US, and then kind of the world that it set up. Does that sound good by you?
That sounds amazing. Having lived through a piece of it, the United States of America piece of it, I'm excited to hear the rest.
Well, before we get into it, what's your earliest memory of Pokemon?
My earliest memory of Pokemon is actually receiving the game. I got Pokemon Blue for my birthday at an Italian restaurant, which is very New Jersey. It was like me and I don't know. It was 1997, I think it came out in the States. And I remember getting it immediately, going home after my birthday, like ripping it open and starting to play it. And I played so much of Pokemon Blue specifically with my friend who lived 3 doors down from me. We lived on a cul-de-sac, and we'd sit at the end of the cul-de-sac together with our Game Boys, like playing Pokemon, just like kind of silently, but also being like, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. And that's like my earliest memory. And then obviously like the cards kind of were in and out there. I collected them. I didn't like play I didn't know how to play the game, but it's really Pokemon Blue that set off everything. So like there was the cards and it was the anime and it was, merch and everything. Like that was really the beginning of it. Yeah.
Our story begins long before that, long before you or I are even twinkles in the eyes of our parents. Begins in the 1960s in Japan with the person most responsible for creating Pokemon, Satoshi Tajiri, who was born in the mid-60s, raised in the Tokyo suburbs. But the Tokyo suburbs are a strange thing in the mid-60s because you're like in city life, but also in nature. And the case that I'm going to make with you today is that Satoshi Tajiri's vision for Pokemon is basically a reflection of the very unique time and space of his childhood. Are you familiar with the Japanese economic miracle?
The economic miracle? No.
Okay, so I love that I sound like I'm about to indoctrinate you into a cult. The Japanese economic miracle refers to this 2 decades of tremendous economic growth. It happens between...
I do know this. I just never heard...
1973.
Yes.
Do you want to share like the general shape of what you know of it?
Yeah, all I know really is that at a certain point, the economic boom was getting to a point where it felt like the economy could do no wrong. And the amount of investment across the country, is specifically in like real estate and architecture, was like exploding. And everybody was buying like multiple properties. And it was pretty wild from at least my reading of it.
Yes, that's basically dead on. Effectively, before World War II, Japan's workforce is heavily focused on agriculture, and then the war happens, and then coming out of it, they shift towards manufacturing and technology specialization. And because of that, there is suddenly a massive influx of wealth, which does a number of things. One, if you have the factories and the manufacturing, you need people centralized. So you people closer to the cities. 2, those people have money, so they want to like buy real estate there. So a whole bunch of stuff is being built, right? And then 3, because they have this money and there's not a lot of space, they're putting money into banks, which in turn makes so the banks can lend more money to create more factories and businesses. So it's this like righteous loop that just completely expands the economy over just 20 years. And what's wild about it, and why I bring it up, like I said, 1955 to 73, back dab in the middle of that is when our hero, Satoshi Tajiri, is born on the outskirts of Tokyo. So he is growing up in what at the time would have been a rural village. Our dude loved catching bugs, as I mentioned. Do you know his actual nickname from childhood?
No.
Dr. Bug.
Dr. Bug.
Dr. Bug.
That's adorable.
He aspired to be an entomologist, which, in a way, he kind of did in his own way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as much as he loves nature, he loves all this stuff, the real estate boom is totally inescapable. And over the course of the first 15 years of his life, that rural village goes from rural to kind of traditional village to outer suburb to part of Tokyo, effectively, over a just exceptionally short period of time. And he goes from traditional rural Japanese childhood of like, I'm outdoors, I'm collecting insects and frogs. And like, that's my favorite thing to do. Mm-hmm. To suddenly being told like, hey, you should like learn how to use a computer. And there's no more room for you outside anymore. So like, where are you going to hang out? Well, we have these new things called arcades. And that is literally him 0 to 15. You will not be surprised to learn that that is not the most stabilizing way for a person to grow up. And by the time he's 16, he's just getting, tech basically put on his plate. Like his life has been decided for him. His family's like, yeah, you'll probably be like a electrical repairman. That seems really good. He starts cracking open some video game consoles. He's going to the arcade. They give him a Space Invaders machine to like take home and tinker with. And then he gets into video games. He plays other games. And he's like, I love this hobby so much. I need to create a zine about it.
But yeah.
The true life is not making games. It is making zines. It is running a video game publication.
Right. It's just talking about them all the time.
His zine's name is Game Freak.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
exhilarating.
Game Freak is the company that will become the company that makes Pokemon. He and his friend Ken Sugimori, along with some other people, create a zine called Game Freak. And it is, I mean, effectively, like if you made a podcast today, it is a zine-ass zine. It debuts in 1982. It is like hot takes and tips. And it is handwritten, photocopied, stapled together, sold for, pennies on the dollar.
A lot of zines that become companies do not get to keep their name. I will say this. I know a lot of people they grew up making zines in like the 80s and the 90s, and then they formed companies out of what their zines were at one point. Almost none of them get to keep their name. I love and respect the hell out of Game Freak still being Game Freak. That's amazing. It also
makes so much more sense why the company that makes Pokemon is called Game Freak. It sounds like this totally childish and kind of crummy name. And they're like, oh, because children came up with it. Got it. Cool.
It was a zine. Yeah.
So
it's great.
He is interviewed in Time magazine, and this was back in like the late 90s. And he says about the zine, the biggest sales were for a special issue on the Xavius game. We sold 10,000 copies. It cost 300 yen each. So when I was 18, I already had a business going. At first, I used a copy machine. More important than style was selling information. But when sales increased, it was difficult to do it by hand, so we took a printer. And then the bonkers thing happens. Game Freak becomes basically the Cahiers de Cinema, which is the French film criticism magazine that inspires the new wave of French cinema. You have a whole bunch of people at Game Freak who are like, hey, we love gaming, but most games suck. What if we made our own?
Wow.
And that is the origin of Game Freak as a video game studio.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Because I feel like that's so frequently the push-pull between the critic-creator dynamic, right? Is at a certain point you have, I think everyone has that feeling. Like everyone who engages in analysis or crit eventually has a thought of like, why not me? And I love that that's where Pokemon came from also. I had no idea.
And it's kind of like that perfect technological moment too, where two people could make a video game if they wanted to. So it was possible to do this in the same way that like French New Wave, it's not the digital cinema revolution, but you could make a film for pretty cheap. So one little detail here before we go into the actual game making. which is around this time in the mid-'80s when they're just, humble zine makers, Tajiri meets Tsunekazu Ishihara. Are you familiar with this person?
I'm not.
I wasn't either, which will be surprising later on. But this person is about 8 years older than Tajiri, like actually an adult out there doing the thing. And Ishihara already has tons of experience across media. He helped ship a game. He's produced television series on games, which is wild. Again, this is like the early 80s. He published a video game encyclopedia. And again, in the early 80s, he was already learning how to do CGI art. So just this technologist who kind of seems to know everybody and kind of takes a little bit of like a mentor-mentee relationship with Tajiri. Again, this will come back later. So the Game Freak crew, we're now in 1989. We've moved into the world of actually making games.
Yes.
They're pitching, they're selling, they're shipping their very first game. It is called Quinty or Mindel Palace. It is a puzzle game. I'm going to share the box with you.
Please.
And I would love for you to just describe what you're seeing here for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. I'm bringing it up. Wow. Wow. All right. So what do we got here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters on this purple box. Oh, we'll go from the bottom left. The bottom left character appears to be some kind of like witch or wizard with green French fries coming out of their head. Above them seems to be some kind of martial artist who is maybe dancing in this moment. Next to them is a very stern blonde woman. Next to her is what I can only describe as like a Star Wars cast-off, folding their arms stoically. And next to them, most intriguingly, maybe, is a mohawk-clad, maybe wrestler who is screaming at a castle wall. And then there's like a kid drawing on the ground, another wrestler, and then another guy who I think is just going for a swim. I'm assuming he's unrelated to the game, and he just happened to be there when they were.
I always thought he looked kind of like a mysterious supervillain, but in hindsight, he is surrounded in water, and he might be wearing just goggles and a swim cap.
I think he's wearing a swim cap. I think he's just going for a swim. I don't think he meant to be anywhere near Mendel Palace. I think he just accidentally showed up on the day when they were drawing this cover.
Now, you will be surprised to learn that this is not what the game is about. The game is about you, who must save your girlfriend, who has been kidnapped by your younger sister, who is jealous of all the attention that you're giving said girlfriend. That is the arc of the game. In the US, you are saving a girl trapped in her dreams. Either way, same gameplay idea, which is evade evil dolls using a tile flipping mechanic.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem to relate to either version of the story or the cover of the game.
You know what I'm realizing looking at it, actually? And this is maybe a more contemporary pull for people. If you've played UFO 50, it's what Magic Garden is based off of.
That also makes sense. That feels like the most UFO 50 thing.
It does,
possible. Yeah. Anyway, they're basically doing whatever they can to make rent. Like, they're making this stuff. They are writing freelance game reviews for other magazines. They're just doing whatever it takes to keep Game Freak afloat.
Yeah. So the zine is done. They're just making games and writing for other people.
Like the Game Freak at this point, from what I can tell, is fully a game company. And then they individually are like, hey, I still need to pay my bills. So they're just taking freelance work wherever they can find it. So 1990 comes around.
Yes.
And Satoshi Tajiri sees the Game Boy and the connection cable, more importantly. And he has this idea for a video game. He wanted a game that would bring that pleasure of bug collecting to all the modern kids who now lived in cities and would never get to have that experience that he had had in the early years growing up just outside of Tokyo. And he sees this connection cable and he's like, oh, you could not just compete with each other, you could like give things to people. And the game that inspires him to do this is Dragon Quest II.
Oh,
Right?
I'm sitting here, like, no joke for the video viewers at home. I'm like sitting here polishing a metal slime while we're talking. I'm not even kidding. Like, I've just been like fiddling with it while we've been talking this whole time.
And his idea for it is like, even to this day, so relatable. It is, hey, there are rare item drops in Dragon Quest II. I don't want to have to grind for them. What if my friend has an extra? Could they just give it to me?
Hook me up with that moon ring.
Which is so good, and yet even today is still perverted by things like NFTs. We're like,
Yeah, right.
for whatever reason, this idea still isn't really possible.
Yeah.
So the insects in that Time interview, Tajiri is asked about, like, where do you get the ideas? Is it from these insects? And Tajiri says, yeah, kids play inside their homes now. They've forgotten about catching insects. So had I. When I was making games, something clicked, and I decided to make a game with that concept. Everything I did as a kid kind of rolled into one. That's what Pokemon is. Playing games, watching TV, Ultraman with his capsule monsters, they all became ingredients for the game. He also liked the idea of like the portability of insects, but then imagined, like, well, we need big monsters fighting. That's what people like. And that is where that Ultraman thing comes in. I did not know this, that Ultraman, specifically Ultra 7, had a capsule monster device that would like capture kaiju.
It's awesome.
And that is where we get the Pokeball.
Wow. It's brilliant. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest problem happening for our buds at Game Freak in 1990 as they are about to pitch Pokemon?
Is this when the economy starts collapsing?
That's a fair guess. I'm not going to say it's right, but it's a good guess. Any other theories?
No. I feel like, well, I guess just like finding a partner, right?
So basically,
financially,
yes.
Yeah.
They have this idea for Pokemon. This is 1990, years before Pokemon becomes a thing. They take it to Nintendo. They pitch it, and pretty much everybody hates it. They're like, nah, this is no thank you.
Right.
Except for one Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, stands up and he says, I see potential here.
Yeah.
And of course, Miyamoto says there's potential. Everybody else immediately is like, oh, yeah, there's totally potential. I'm like, yeah,
right.
I mean, of course, sir. I definitely see it.
Because if you believe the mythology of Shigeru Miyamoto at Nintendo, right, or at least the way like he and Nintendo pitch his own mythology, it's every game I make is in some way hearkening back to what I did in my childhood or my own hobbies or interests, to the point where I think there is that rumor, which I think is not true, that Nintendo won't let him talk about his hobbies because they're worried that other people will steal whatever he's doing and turn it into video games. That's definitely not true. That's like the Dragon Quest can't come out on weekends thing. That's also not true. But you can see how in that world, if you view it through that lens, Miyamoto would be the guy to stand up and be like, absolutely, yes.
Oh, yeah. He probably sees, he's like, that's just me. That sounds exactly like me.
I also do think like from there is an emotionally resonant part of that pitch that is Japan has expanded, or at least Tokyo has expanded so rapidly in terms of becoming a megacity that so many of these previously rural locations no longer have places to like do the things that we did in our beautiful, summers of long ago, Natsuyasumi of it all. But
yeah,
I think that is really interesting. Like, I've always known that Pokemon came from the idea of collecting bugs, but I'd never realized the connection to also you can't really do that in the place where a lot of these people once grew up, or the creators grew up. It's interesting.
I will fill in for people who are not super hardcore video game listeners. When Brendan said Natsuyasumi, he is referencing a game called Boku no Natsuyasumi, which basically means my summer vacation. And he is not saying Nazi Yasumi or anything like that, which it might sound like it was said really quickly and you don't know. But yes, it is an entire series that is everything that we've described so far, minus the monsters.
Yeah.
So, yes, you said earlier, big problem would be finding a partner. That's correct. The other big problem, they don't know how to make games. They have pitched this huge Nintendo game. They have made Mendel Palace, a game with 8 random-ass characters on the thing. They are not nearly experienced enough to be making something as big and ambitious as the thing that they pitched. So development lasts for 6 years. It is rough. Multiple people quit. Satoshi Tajiri doesn't take a salary. I think he's like living with his father, or like living off of his father at this point. They're continuing to take side work just to keep the lights on. I did not know this, that Tajiri himself contributed to a couple Mario spinoffs, like Yoshi on the NES.
Really?
Even helped with a Sega game. Yeah, I mean, they're like truly barely keeping their head above water. And then at a certain point, when it's, the darkest of all, they get some investment from a company that would become Creature Inc. But at the time, I believe, or just before this, it was called Ape. And I would love to tell you about Ape.
Yeah.
It was founded by Shigesato Itoi, who...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, can you tell people about who this person is?
Itoi, oh my God, maybe one of the most interesting people who has ever lived and continues to live, to be clear. But Itoi, best known, I think, probably by your listeners as the creator of Earthbound.
Yeah.
And Mother, or the Mother series, I guess, in general. But also was in a punk band, lived a life as one of the greatest advertising copywriters in all of Japan, was also the voice of the father in My Neighbor Totoro. He had a brief voice acting stint. So he, in the Japanese dub of My Neighbor Totoro, he's the dad, and is now the CEO and founder of Hobonichi, which is like one of the most desirable bullet journal notebook companies on earth. And that's just like the hits.
Some of it.
Yeah. Go read his Wikipedia. It's unreal what this guy has done in his life.
Yes. So he had this company, Ape, and with Ape had created the Mother games, and which is Earthbound.
Yes.
In America. And Satoru Iwata and HAL Laboratory had lent a hand to Ape when they were in the darkest point financially to finish Earthbound, because they also had a really rough development cycle for Earthbound. And now Ape, or Creature, is kind of in this weird middle ground, is effectively passing along the favor. So at this point, and that's why I kind of am wiggle rooming the name of the company, was run by none other than Tsunekazu Ishihara, that technologist that we mentioned earlier, who has just been anywhere and everywhere. Ishihara looks at this, he's a fan of Tajiri's work, and he says, you know what, let's get you some investment. I think we're like pretty close to doing this. I think I can help you get to the finish line too. And he becomes a producer on the game. And right away, again, because Ishihara is this kind of Renaissance person, a multi-hat, business-minded person, he says, not only do I want to help you finish it, let's just start planning everything around it. I want to get a trading card game into development before we even finish the Game Boy project. Like, let's just get stuff moving. And with Ishihara's help, they find their footing and they decide on the general format of what is Pokemon. Ken Sugimori, one of those friends who helped found Game Freak, works with a small team internally to imagine the 151 monsters, and he is responsible for all of the art for it. Mm-hmm. So this artist from a zine ends up being the designer of all of the Pokemon that we know today. And then a last-minute idea comes from Miyamoto himself, who says, you know what? You should make 2 versions of this game. You want to get people to trade. You need that friction. It'll force players to do it. So it is Miyamoto who is cited as being responsible for that idea.
I had no idea.
One problem. It needs a name. Are you familiar with any of the names that Pokemon went by that were not Pokemon?
Digital monsters. How do you shorten that? No, I don't know.
Capsule monsters?
Capsulemon, yeah.
which became Capumon. Pocket Monsters is eventually the finalized option after dealing with a lot of trademarks issues. I guess there's a lot of other Pocket Monster things out there at the time. And then Pocket Monsters shortens to Pokemon. In Japan, the first 2 games, they are Pokemon Red and Green, not Red and Blue. Do you know any reason why that is?
Oh, why they decided to change green to blue when it came here?
Yeah.
I have no idea outside of maybe just showing off the fact that there were 3 starters, because they each map to one of the 3 starters.
The best info that I could find is that they eventually made a blue version in Japan that was kind of a like patch upgrade in a way of red and green in Japan. And then I think that they wanted to communicate that to the Western market, but that makes no sense because it assumes that people in the West are like, oh, well, blue is the good one.
Right, yeah.
I don't fully understand it. I imagine it also was like a marketing thing. Like, they just didn't like that Bulbasaur was...
Yeah, maybe something about the turtle with tank guns plugged into its back was going to sell better in the States.
That does
understandable.
Right.
A dragon and a tank that's also a turtle.
Versus a giant flower that's belching.
Yeah.
A final touch here. Satoshi is the original default player name. And his rival's default name is Shigeru. Just very sweet. They were just close buds. So the game, it's coming out, and the expectations are like pretty low. Do you remember the Game Boy around like 1995-ish? What would you describe the state of the Game Boy at that point?
The state of the Game Boy, at least in my memory of it, and also through my own like research, I guess you could say, over the years, essentially that the idea of taking games, initially you have the home console saying you can take games outside of the arcade and put them in your own home, and now we've evolved to you can take games out of your home and they can be on the go with you. But the state of the Game Boy, generally speaking, is a lot of very small versions of games, or like wildly, I would say, minimized versions of games that you would recognize from elsewhere. So like if you go look at Super Mario Land or even Mario Land 2, but mainly Super Mario Land, compare that to any other mainline Mario game, and the difference is pretty stark in terms of like how Mario looks and how he runs and jumps and just generally what that game looks and feels like. It feels like a pretty large step down. It's not until you get to the second one where it feels like it's a little bit more one-to-one, but even then it takes a lot of time, I think, for developers to fully understand how to get the most power out of the Game Boy in a way that makes sense. So you have a lot of games that are really taking off that are like Tetris, very simple arcadey things that you could just turn on and off that make use of the fact that you could just be jumping into and out of games very quickly. I will say this, at least in my own experience playing a lot of Game Boy games semi-recently for a thing that we're not doing, which is that Pokemon is by far the game that takes the most advantage of what the Game Boy is possible of, and puts Game Freak, at least in my estimation, at like the forefront of game development for mobile systems at the time.
Yeah, no, that is such perfect context, because you listening to this might hear that and be like, oh, why would you not expect that to be a huge hit? But you have effectively 5 years of the Game Boy not being that.
Right.
So people see it as mostly a dawdle or a distraction, as a gimmick or a toy. And it is seemingly at the end of its life. 5 years, it was outdated hardware when it shipped. Is there really that much interest in it anymore? So expectations are actually kind of low. And that was part of the appeal of something like the trading cards. Was like, well, if people don't play this, at least they'll be into some other thing. This is a quote from Tajiri. He said, "Just when I finished the game and took it to Nintendo, I felt like a baseball player who slides into second base, even though you know you're going to be out. But then it turns out you are safe." So like he himself truly did not think that this would be it. And it takes a beat. Like, it actually takes a few months for word of mouth to spread. But as it does, as people start getting into the social features, it is exponential growth. It skyrockets. And another important thing happens this year, which is Nintendo puts out the Game Boy Pocket. So suddenly it was just easier to carry around Pokemon and make it a part of your like social life versus the big clunky Game Boy of the past. And that is it. Suddenly Pokemon is out in the world. And what we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break, and then we will come back and we will talk about Pokemon taking over everything. We are back. It's 1996. Pokemon has released in Japan, and we are waiting watching the video. And it is just exponential growth. And you know what our buddy Satoshi Tajiri does? He just goes right back to work. They are like, okay, you did it. You made the video game. We're so proud of you. We need you to work nonstop now because we need the new version of it. We need Pokemon Blue in Japan. We need sequels. We need that trading card game. We need it all, and we need it yesterday. And fortunately for them, maybe not for the well-being of himself and as a reference for the rest of the industry, Tajiri lives for this. In his words, sleep 12 hours and then work 24 hours. I've worked those irregular hours for the past 3 years. This is in 1999. It's better to stay up day and night to come up with ideas. I usually get inspiration for game designing by working this schedule, which sounds like sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations.
Yeah. Is that Isaac Newton, who very famously would hold a metal ball in his hand above the glass, the metal dish, and then whenever he fell asleep, he would like slip and lose the ball, and then it would clang, and then he would immediately wake up and then write down whatever idea came into his head. It sounds like that's what he was doing, but for game design.
Bulbasaur! Oh, Bulbasaur!
Yeah. What about evolution that was mega?
At the same time as this, Ishihara is like, great. This is what I was born for. Let me go out and do everything in his like movies or anime TV, tons and tons of licensed toys, apparel, stores. Let me just get everything out there. Let's take advantage of this boom while we can. The exponential growth, it really spikes going into 1997. In Japan, selling 3.65 million units in Japan, which is staggering. It beats Final Fantasy VII for best-selling game that year.
Wow.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to hear word of Pokemon in the US. Do you remember the paranoia in America that anime would give children seizures?
I do remember that, yes.
Let me tell you, that comes from Pokemon.
Yes.
It was the Pokemon anime TV series. It was reported that over 700 kids went into seizures because of flashing lights, rapid flashing lights in the Pokemon anime.
Yeah, the Porygon episode. Yeah.
Yes. Medical spoilers, not every anime gives people seizures, nor does everything from Japan. But that is kind of how you would have thought things worked based off of the reporting at the time. It was an episode that was edited for less flashing lights in its American release. But that's like kind of the first word of it. What is making its way to the States is more just, kind of like xenophobic hysteria. So anyway, they're making the English version of the game, and they're like, hey, we think this is going to be a hit in the West if we can just get it over there. One problem, they have to localize it and translate it, and to do that, they have to fit the English characters into the tiny little Game Boy cart, and that's very, very hard. Are you familiar with these issues? Have you ever heard about this?
Yeah, so the localization efforts, at least in this era, are pretty difficult, just because generally speaking, at least I know this, the way the Pokemon games were coded was like real duct tape hours. And And the text boxes are not as malleable as you would think, because I don't know. I mean, it sounds like maybe they weren't expecting initially to localize this outside of Japan. And, I don't think they thought it was going to be as big a phenomenon as humanly possible. So they were not forward thinking in the way that they designed the text boxes in particular, which is why it's very, very, very difficult to then figure out how to take Japanese characters, which is able to contain a lot more information in a small density, than English characters, which basically would require a complete rewrite of the entire script, and a lot of stuff gets lost along the way.
100%, to the point that they basically have to reprogram the game. And from what I understand,
right.
Pokemon Blue, again, they're reporting all this is like very hazy, but it sounds like Pokemon Blue in Japan, this patch update version, was basically, we made the game, we turned it in, we shipped it months later, and then after shipping it, we all looked at the code and were like, this is not real. Like, we cannot build on this. And they completely reprogrammed the game from the ground up for Pokemon Blue to then kind of build the rest of Pokemon off of. But yes, the original code for Pokemon Red Green, 100% was taped together at best. It makes so much sense when you think of, like, when they started this, they didn't know how to make games. And then they made a game for 6 years. The difference in quality of coding, I can't imagine.
Yeah, between beginning and end. Yeah, and also, if you're still working on the foundations of that code from 6 years ago, it's going to be rough. And then also it's worth mentioning, like, those games are, depending on who you ask, like, famously broken also. There are a lot of exploits within them. There are a lot of things that just, like, purport to work that don't, like certain stats. And there are certain type matchups that are, like, wildly, wildly, wildly imbalanced in those games. And not all of that is addressed in the move over to the US, but, like, some of it is here and there. But even to this day, there are Pokemon ROM hackers who are going in and being like, let me see if I can fix Red and Blue, and, like, trying their hand at fixing that code, which is fascinating. In 2025, people are still going after it.
So the other problem that they face right now, on top of, hey, like, can we just program a game that will ship, is the existential question of Japanese media coming to America in the 1990s. Do we have to make it edgy? Or can it just be cute? And this is so much hand-wringing across every part of the team, across Nintendo. And it actually was the then president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, who put the kibosh on all of it and said, like, nope, they're going to be cute. They are what they are. We're not going to, like, split the characters in half. So there's Japanese version and there's the English version. And they commit to it. And 1998 comes around. They're set for the US release. And they have the game. They have the card game. They have the animated series. And they have the movie basically prepped. And they have now sold, by 1998, 9 million copies of the game in Japan.
Oh my God.
Basically everybody, every family is playing this game. And I didn't know this. Pokemon centers had already begun to pop up in Japan. The actual stores that you go to. Yes. And it is this partnership between Nintendo, Game Freak, and the investors that we heard about earlier that creates the Pokemon centers. And that is when they start to actually work together. And that will lead us, as we will see later, to the Pokemon Company. So it's not the game's success. It is retail environments that get these things together.
This is the story of Pokemon in general. That's like the nucleus of this entire story, I think. Yes.
Yeah. So it's 1998. It's just out of the US release. All these parties realize they're holding a major hit. And I'm curious for you, like, what do you remember? What do you know about the media, especially the kids' media environment of the early 1990s? Like, has anything prepared kids for Pokemon?
I guess, like, speaking as someone who was a kid who Pokemon was laser targeted at, it was unlike most of the stuff I was watching, right? Because if you turn on Nickelodeon, for example, and look at other cartoons, the answers are like Rugrats and Doug and stuff. which is about as far from that as possible. There's kind of a fantastical element going on, but I do think in terms of like being built strand of DNA by strand of DNA from the ground up to be a thing that is like the beginning of a funnel that you tumble down into, and then on the other end you don't have any money. Like most stuff wasn't built that way in kids media, with the exception of like, the Batman animated series or things that were based on like other intellectual property elsewhere. But for the most part, like it was like, Power Rangers, I guess, was the closest we got, now that I'm thinking about it, to maybe, like imported Japanese media, I guess. But even then, the way it was like reframed for American audiences is like pretty different than what aired initially. So yeah, Pokemon was very, very different. And I remember immediately like all of my friends and I being completely obsessed with the show as soon as it started airing.
I mean, I completely agree. All kids media was designed to make people money, but it felt very simple. It was like, oh, we make He-Man cartoon to sell He-Man toy.
Yes.
It wasn't all encompassing where it's, oh, we're going to take over the culture. You're so spot on with Power Rangers, which makes so much sense considering the kaiju influence and the Ultraman. The other two that I could put together was Tamagotchi of virtual animal rearing, which is more of like a contemporary. And then Beanie Babies was the only other thing that I could think of. But again, what's so wild about Pokemon is it's all of those at the same time.
Yeah.
Instead of just one of them.
I think that's kind of what I mean more than anything else. It's clear now in retrospect, and maybe it was clear to my parents and I just didn't know, but it's clear to me in retrospect that it was like almost a full frontal assault. Like when you think about how Pokemon took over, it's just because they had everything immediately. It was like the game came out and the cards came out and the show was out and the merch was everywhere. And like, even if you're going to like buy back to school supplies, there were Pokemon pencils you could buy. It was everywhere. I went as Ash Ketchum, I think in 1997 for Halloween. Like it was everywhere.
Yeah. September 98, Red and Blue releases in the US.
Or I guess 98.
Reportedly spends $13 million in marketing. I found some estimates that go up to $50 million, which is a lot, but not take over the world a lot. And it has a partner who spends another $12 million. And that partner is KFC.
Oh, really?
Yeah. KFC has kids menu toys, including a card game that is technically available before the English version of the Pokemon card game.
Interesting.
When I say card game, it is basically a matching game. It is not like elaborate. They also sold knockoff Beanie Babies. Now, I'm not looking for you to guess like which ones they have here. I want to know like honest answer. If I told you, hey, Pokemon's just come out, you can have 4 Pokemon, you're going to sell them as Beanie Babies, which 4 would you pick?
Yeah, there's the like obvious go-tos, right? Which is like Pikachu and Eevee being like the two most popular in Japan. So like, oh, let's see if they work in the States. But also, because we're in the States and there is that question of like edgy versus cute, it starts to raise some questions about what direction you go in. Because my answer would be Pikachu, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. Just like the starters and Pikachu. It's your mascot and the 3 that you get in the video game. Who did they have? I'm so excited to find out. I'm sure it's bizarre.
It's all of your favorites.
Yeah.
Vulpix.
Okay.
Dratini. Seal. And Zubat.
Oh, that's really good.
What else would they possibly pick?
Yeah. Oh my god. A Zubat Beanie Baby is so good.
You know how they say like every Pokemon is one person's favorite Pokemon? I think there are 2 on that list who aren't.
Yeah.
Seal might be the least loved Pokemon imaginable. What if I told you it's a seal and we just used 2 E's when we wrote the name?
So much. That's so awesome.
The game itself comes out amidst all of this, covered in KFC grease. It is received very well by critics, including a rare 10 out of 10 on IGN, which I saw, and I was like, good for them. Calling the shot. You knew what was good. No, I took it back immediately. They published the review many months later. They published it in the summer of 1999.
Oh.
And they were like, oh yeah, this thing's like pretty popular, 10 out of 10.
We knew what
the
we
review is actually about how popular it is.
Oh, okay.
I was so mad.
Come on.
Anyway, the game sells really well. They sell 200,000 copies in 2 weeks. They sell 4 million copies before the end of the year. That's basically in 3 months. Pokemon, the first movie, opens. This is from Slate. When a Los Angeles radio station announced a contest for free movie tickets, 70,000 calls a minute overwhelmed the switchboard.
Oh my God.
Have you seen Pokemon the first?
I was there day one, baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
How
Pokemon.
was that?
I loved it. I had a great time as a kid. Yeah, I remember my parents being like, that was terrible. Yeah, they didn't like it. But I mean, even to this day, that movie still, I think, has captured the heart and mind of the collective internet. There are so many quotes from that movie. The circumstances of your birth monologue from U2 at the end is like an all-timer that gets used in TikTok edits to this day. Just match up any character from Stranger Things and the end of U2 monologue. It's there.
Yeah, it also seems like a lot was lost in localization of it. I guess that they had changed quite a bit. They wanted to make it less, not edgy, ironically, but less dramatic.
That's interesting.
American version. Yeah.
Can I also say, as a person who was a kid when that movie was in theaters, all of my friends immediately clocked the fact that there were Pokemon who were not into video games in that movie. That was one of the first things that everyone talked about. The next day at school was what's up with that elephant that rolls around? Very confusing. It was immediately apparent that there was something going on there. Linking that also to the very first episode of the anime, Ash sees a Pokemon that is also not in the video games fly overhead. And there is this inkling amongst kids at the time that there will be more. This isn't it. And, I had no idea when. I did not have my finger on the pulse of the video game industry as a 6-year-old. But there was this very clever way of acknowledging to kids, that's not it. You think there's 151 Pokemon? Baby, you haven't seen anything yet.
That's the best feeling in the world for a kid where it's oh, the world is so much bigger than I can even imagine, which is already how the real world feels. So then you have that in your game and you're like, geez, what can't happen in here? Yeah. To answer your question from earlier, from what I could find, in December of this year, of 98, in modest quantities, the trading card game hits the U.S. under the Wizards of the Coast label. But again, it's tough with anything games related during this period because maybe it came out a full year earlier, but only in one store in Albany.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So 1999, this is the year that Pokemon explodes in the U.S. I just want to share some quotes with you of how much this thing blows up. To start, I mentioned the Wizards of the Coast thing. For toys, Hasbro paid $325 million to license and market these toys. And the media is really struggling to talk about it. Because of exactly what you said, there isn't really a reference point for something that is doing so many things all at once.
Yeah. It's the only contemporary I think Pokemon has at the time is what Disney already is.
Yes.
At that point, 70 years into existence.
And it had been able to teach people how to talk about it.
Right. Imagine you have a thing as big as the Walt Disney Company just appear out of thin air one day. It's unbelievable.
In all of its characters. As if it's all just very normal. This is from a timepiece. Time covered Pokemon a lot. From 1999, Monsters make for disquieting playmates. No matter how toy-like and frivolous they may appear, monsters are unnatural and in the end feel an unresolved fear. But monsters also have a way with children. Consider the suspicious charms of the Pokemon creature Gengar, Cubone, and Chansey, for example.
Wow, my guy Gengar gets a shout out. Love it.
The closest comparison that they muster for other holiday kind of toy trends, they say, parents who've had to suffer through the games, the TV series, and shopping trips can take some comfort in the fact that Pokemon demographic is the same one that has abandoned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers. What may be harder to survive is the relentlessness of Pokemania, a multimedia and interactive barrage like no other before it, with children mesmerized into cataloging a menagerie of multiplicative monsters, with trading cards linked to games, linked to television shows, linked to toys, linked to websites, linked to candy, linked back to where you started. A pestilential Ponzi scheme.
Wow. They had a great time writing that piece, first of all.
They really
They were cooking.
And then just to like capture the confusion of what the hell is this thing and what's the difference. This is from the Seattle Times. The show can't be missed, he says. Why? Because he's collecting a Poke-Whatsits, and a missed episode would mean the collection would have gaps.
Sure.
Definitely how it works.
Yeah, Poke-Whatsits, yeah.
What was your parents' reaction to your Pokemania?
They were mostly encouraged, maybe not encouraging, but they like gave into it, I guess, because I clearly liked the game a lot. And as I already mentioned, like the game actually got me going outside, right? At the end of the day, the pitch of you can share this stuff with your friends was true enough that I was, with the one other kid who was my age on my street going outside and we were playing Pokemon together and constantly plugging link cables in and playing that game. Same thing with the cards. Like the cards were getting me to hang out with other kids at school, right? Like it was an extremely social thing. So I think from that regard, I don't know if they saw it as harmless or not, but they definitely weren't anti-Pokemon for me.
Do you remember any of the kind of critiques of Pokemon in the late 90s, early 2000s?
I remember specifically my middle school banning Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
That started happening a lot as far as I was aware. I remember hearing about that happening at schools before it happened at my school.
Do you remember why they banned it?
The reason that they gave for my school in particular was basically kids taking advantage of each other and trading cards that were significantly more valuable for ones that were not valuable at all, basically just through like brute force. Or through, straight up bullying. So people saw Pokemon cards as like the nexus point of bullying in my middle school, I guess. And they were like, if we ban Pokemon cards, then bullying will go. And they cured it. There hasn't been bullying ever since.
And it's kind of incredible, Yeah. It's
our utopic society. Yeah. That we live in.
Notoriously safe schools of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Dark. Yeah, I was not familiar with this because I'm a little bit older than you. I think I was in maybe junior high. I don't know at this point. And I don't remember any of these bans. I thought people didn't like Pokemon because it was, I don't know, like witches or something like that. That is just why I assumed people didn't like anything for.
Oh, yeah.
So I did not understand that it was gambling and trading. And the most uncomfortable thing about this for me is like kind of right, like it's awkward to say, but like Pokemon plays a pretty real part in popularizing and normalizing, I would say, like gambling adjacent structures of loot boxes.
Yeah.
It really popularizes I'm going to go buy the card set and see what's there. And I won't know until after I've purchased it.
Do you think, here's an interesting question for you though. Like this could have been anything. Right? Like say for example, baseball cards somehow got as big as Pokemon before Pokemon did, the exact same thing would have happened.
I'm glad you mentioned that because baseball cards were as big as Pokemon before Pokemon, and a California law firm took this to court, both for Pokemon cards and sports trading cards. And it was dismissed multiple times. over and over and over again, it could not get traction because it is legal. It's just adjacent, you know. It has shades of the ick. So yeah, at this point, even early on, exactly like you said, it is becoming the stock commodity that it still is today. So I have this quote from the LA Times from 1999. It is absolutely brutal in hindsight. Here it is. 8-year-old Bryce McLeod had a Charizard, a fire-breathing Pokemon coveted by another youngster. The bid for it got higher and higher from his father. He just kept throwing cards down until he got it from us, said Bryce's dad, Dan McLeod. It was a 6-for-1 trade. They're learning about free market enterprise, about supply and demand. Anybody who gave up their Charizard for 6 cards, I don't care what 6 cards they were, is regretting that.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
They're a fool.
It's so funny, that era also, like my parents, just like all parents at the time, were all in on Beanie Babies. Like they totally bought into the craze of them being like the investment. So then when Pokemon came around, all of the parents who had been disillusioned by the Beanie Baby craze were like, it's not going to be Pokemon. Which, oh, damn.
I mean, they should be right. You know, like
they should be right. No, don't get me wrong.
Only fad.
Cooler heads should have prevailed there, but I mean, damn, Pokemon sure still is around.
And as with all this, people immediately start losing their mind. There's a bunch of people trying to get on cable news, and they're willing to basically say anything to get, you know, that TV hit. On CNN, for example, a child psychiatrist claimed that kids were like quite literally brainwashed and that they couldn't think about anything other than Pokemon. What's great is in the same report, the chillest mom on the planet was asked about Pokemon and was like, it's cool. I got a copy. I play it on business trips. I have all the Pokemon now. Great mom.
That rocks.
Such a classic bit of like good parenting, which is if your kid's into it, just also play it. Get into it. It's such a great hack. We also saw this as like kind of how people started to talk about Satoshi Tajiri, the creator, from one of those many Times articles, described Tajiri as an otaku, which especially in 1999 is like a term nobody is familiar with. This is a quote from a French journalist who had spent years studying otaku in the 1990s. They know the difference between the real and virtual worlds, but they would rather be in a virtual world. They are always accumulating things. The more they have, the better they feel. Thus, the first and central rule of Pokemon, accumulate. Yeah, it's not great. You know? It's not great. But all of this hysteria, looking through all of this, I don't think it happens without the TV show. I think that's the thing that, like, is the rocket fuel for it. The TV show became the #1 children's show on both syndication and on networks, despite being on WB, which was not a popular channel at the time. And it had competition basically right away. Digimon was on Fox before the end of 1999. I also think like Pokemon's TV success feels really inevitable in hindsight. But we also have to remember that Nintendo's other animated series like Zelda and Mario were busts. They weren't, you know, beloved in nearly the same way. Did you were watching the show from the very beginning?
Yeah, I was a big fan. Yeah, immediately.
What do you remember from it? Because I kind of bounced in and out of it, again, being a little bit older.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel this way about Pokemon in general, where it stands so apart from the media genre classifications that it's a part of that it took me until my teenage years and later to start to put those pieces back together. Like until 2018 or so, I never considered myself a fan of RPGs as like a video game genre. And then I was like, oh wait, Pokemon has always been a turn-based RPG. What am I talking about? Like I've played every Pokemon game. And similarly, like I didn't know or couldn't conceive of the idea of like a shonen trope in an anime, right? Like I didn't know what anime was compared to cartoons, and I had never heard of shonen before. But like in retrospect, the shonen genre is like so specifically tuned for if you can get the characters and the vibe right, can be so perfectly tuned for kids of exactly that age to live out, power fantasies over and over again, right? It's like I would say, preteen version of Dragon Ball Z for kids. So at the time, it was like, Ash is running around catching all these Pokemon. And I could also be doing that in the game. Like while I'm watching the TV show, I'm also playing the video game. But simultaneously, I think the most important thing atop all of this, and it's the thing that I'm always chasing and always talking about, at least on all of the things that I do, is this idea that the games have never really done a good job of clearly showing you what it would be like to live in this world. It's so abstracted through the video game lens that you don't actually get to feel the ramifications, like societally speaking, of living alongside these creatures. And that's what the show enables you to do. It's essentially like, the thing that everybody says about Final Fantasy VII Remake is like, oh, wow, I saw it the way, or I'm playing this game and I'm seeing it the way I saw it as a kid, even though the graphics were obviously very, very different. There was just enough there that I was able to kind of fill in the gaps with my mind. What the Pokemon Company managed to do, or at least Game Freak and Nintendo and Creatures Inc. at this point, what they managed to do with the TV show, which I think was so brilliant, was you didn't need to fill in the gaps with your mind. They were literally showing you what it was like to live in this world.
Yeah.
And that, at the end of the day, is the most powerful thing about it. And that was the reason that I was tuning in and all my friends were tuning in at the time.
Yeah, that's so wonderfully put. I think for the parents, which is not nearly as elegant, is that they just see it. Like, if the kids having it on the Game Boy, invisible to them.
Right.
The trading cards, whatever, it's just another, toy. Seeing it passively on the TV, I think, makes it part of their world. It becomes inescapable in a way that these other things aren't. So, yeah, the Historia full bloom. Now we have Burger King toys. We've upgraded from KFC.
Yeah, I remember the Burger King toys, actually.
They could not keep them on shelves at this point because now everybody actually knows what Pokemon is. Kids are taking off school to go and see the film. I think Pokemon Millennium or 2000.
Pokemon 2000.
Is maybe this year or a year away. Pokemon flu, as I mentioned, becomes a term. There's a piece that claims a 9-year-old in Long Island stabbed another child over a Pokemon card dispute. Again, all these things are a little hard to verify from this time. Slate has a story about one Colorado preacher who made kids in his congregation watch as he torched Pokemon cards and chopped a Pokemon toy with a sword. This was a line from a story that I found that I think really represents the kind of fake versus real threats of toxic fan culture. The 4 to 12-year-old set can exhibit the most troubling fanaticism about Pokemon. Children have written hate email to movie critics who have panned the film. After a screening and being mesmerized by Pokemon Battle, an excited little boy told his father, "That movie makes me want to fight. Not words parent want to hear." What's so fantastic about that is that movie makes me want to fight. Like, not real. Like,
right.
Kids say stuff all the time.
Would you believe me if I told you that kids say the darndest things, Chris?
They do. They are known to say the darndest things. And yet, the thing about kids sending hate email to movie critics, wow.
Yeah.
Things change, things stay the same, my friend. Yeah. That is the thing that the parents should be worried about.
Right.
Not, I want to fight. It's you emailing Roger Ebert that he should kill himself because he doesn't understand the power of Pikachu.
Or Mewtwo, which you shouldn't underestimate the power of Mewtwo.
He didn't listen closely to that
He didn't listen closely.
So, as with these things, when you're in full hysteria, that's when people are prepared for the bubble to pop. There's a Slate article that says, but critics can rest assured that Pokemon won't last. The market will saturate, kids will tire of the 151 creatures and even the 100 new ones on the way from Japan. Sure, as the Backstreet Boys will meet a bad end, you can be certain that the Pokemon generation will
What do they
age
know about
out
the
of the
Backstreet
game.
Boys?
Yeah, they really took us stray, right? The Pokemon generation will age out of the game and into the Sullen Teendom. The generation that follows will find its own craze. This is too bad because Pokemon is undoubtedly much smarter and more charming than what will supplant it. Interesting, right?
Yeah. And also a fascinating read if you think about the fact that Pokemon is what supplanted Pokemon.
Yeah.
And Pokemon has gotten a little bit worse every time that's happened. It's kind of right. In some ways.
It's also the thing that this critic can't see at that time is that we're about to enter pop cultural stasis where IP becomes so important that it's not just that Pokemon is good, it's that people want you to be locked into the same IP for centuries. So I think when I first read this, I was like, wow, they really underestimated Pokemon. And it's like, I don't know, actually. Maybe Pokemon would have had the same experience if we hadn't become so nostalgia obsessed that we just watch Star Wars and play Pokemon over and over again.
I also think it's bringing Disney back into it. You also are coming up against, I think this era is one that Disney has built, right? With pushing back against copyright laws and specifically public domain laws and making sure that Mickey is never used anywhere ever again, does reframe things around singular IP and keeping it relevant as long as humanly possible. I think that the interesting thing too about this era in Pokemon, at least, is behind the scenes. One thing that I learned when we did our bonus episode about Pokemon Crystal for Aether was Gold and Silver, while they were like launched into development immediately after the release of Red and Green, they were created kind of in the vacuum before they knew how big Pokemon was going to be. They were created before they launched in the States. So you have this really interesting case of a sequel coming out that is unaware of how big its predecessor already is. And I feel like that little era of Pokemon that you just went over, including the release of Gold and Silver specifically in Japan, is like Pokemon as pure as it can be. And even then is still just like riddled with how many different ways can we siphon money out of people. It's always going to be that way, but has only gotten more that way as time has gone on. Because as soon as you look at the third generation of Pokemon and everything that has happened between then and now, it's very clear that like that is just the story of it forever. And going back to earlier, talking about the Pokemon centers being the first big unification point, I guess, between Game Freak, Creatures Inc., and Nintendo. The thing that I always say when people complain about new Pokemon games not being good or, Game Freak, lazy devs, et cetera, is like, you're mad at the wrong thing, because the games are by far the thing that brings in the least money for the Pokemon intellectual property. All they are is, again, the opening of a funnel down into merchandising. And because it's these three companies who are allocating how much budget Game Freak gets to make their games, they're giving Game Freak as little money as humanly possible to get people into that beginning of the funnel. And I find that to be deeply, it's cynical, obviously, but it is also the reality of the situation. That when people are complaining about the quality of Pokemon games, you are always barking up the wrong tree and not seeing the forest.
Yes. And it's mistaking the level of risk. If you mess up a game series, that's brutal. If you mess up one of the biggest IP factories on the planet, it's so much worse. You're not just putting the game series at risk when you change the games. You are putting this entire enterprise at risk, and all three are terrified of busting it, especially when people continue to eat it up. Like, why would you change it? And to your point of the purity of it all, just some evidence to support your claim. Pokemon Yellow releases in the US in October. This is our version of the patched edition.
Yeah, Pokemon Yellow is. Did you play Pokemon Yellow? Probably, I imagine.
It's the Pikachu version,
It's
right?
the Pikachu one, yeah. The idea is that it lines up the story of Red and Blue with what happened in the anime. So all the anime characters are showing up.
Gold and Silver is released in Japan in November, and like you said, is being made before all of this, or as all of this is happening. Another 6 million copies of Red and Blue and Yellow are sold in the US in 1999. That is a year after release. 1999 is the year that Pokemon made $7 billion worldwide. It is not a game. As you said, it is just an industry, and it's uncrowded because it's effectively the only thing competing in that industry. And that is where all the copycats just rush in. To wrap it up, I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a Breakfast Club moment, right?
Sure.
Tell you about where things go for all these people. And you can tell me where some of this goes, because I feel like you know a lot of modern Pokemon history. Wizards of the Coast, we'll start with them. Published over a dozen expansion packs. And then they have to transfer the rights back to the Pokemon Company in 2003. And they're probably like, great, we did it. You know, we made all the money off of the fad, and now we're done.
Get out while the getting's good.
Yes, just this past week, the Wall Street Journal published a podcast episode titled, "Is the Hottest Investment Pokemon Cards?" So that shows where we are at with those things. The three stakeholders, as you mentioned, Game Freak, Creatures Inc., and Nintendo, do really the unimaginable, which is they decide to form the Pokemon Company, which for all of the terrible stuff that we've talked about, it's kind of impossible to imagine this in the US, maybe anywhere, that three stakeholders own something that is as valuable as Pokemon. And the instinct is not to lock the other two out or find some way for just one of them to own it or for this to go to court. The idea that they all just were able to come together and agree that this is good for all of us is bonkers. My best guess is they probably couldn't have imagined how long the series would run. And also these close personal relationships. These are people who've known each other. Shigeru is literally a character name in the original Pokemon. The mentor of the creator of Pokemon is the president of the other company. That's, I think, the only way that something like this is really possible when it transcends the business.
They all handle different pieces of the business, too, it's worth mentioning. Like, Game Freak is handling the actual creation, despite the name Creatures Inc., they're handling the creation of the creatures themselves, and they're handling the making of the games. Nintendo is obviously handling the publishing and a lot of licensing, and then Creatures Inc. is actually handling almost all of the merchandising.
Yes. And from what I understand, and I could be wrong here, Creatures Inc. handles the 3D modeling for all of the characters.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's, again, what I have been able to find. It seems like a connection to those very origins of Ishihara, as a CG artist. Again, though, it's a little unclear. They're not especially open about how any of these things
famously
work.
Yeah.
Yes, as you might not be surprised to hear. And then the original game has sold over 30 million units in 2017. It's inducted into the Strong Museum Video Game Hall of Fame. And Satoshi Tajiri is now the executive producer on all of the Pokemon games, and basically is not publicly available. Like, you're not somebody you hear from a whole lot in the past decade or two. Are you even familiar with Satoshi?
No, not at all. Yeah, Sugimori of the two, if you consider the two of them to be kind of the spearheads of Pokemon, Sugimori is the one that you think of in terms of his artistic vision for the game. And he's the one who I think you hear from more frequently.
So you kind of did this a little bit, but to kind of wrap things up, I was hoping that you could walk folks through of where Pokemon goes from here. You mentioned like getting worse and worse, but like, what is Pokemon after all of this?
Yeah, I think one So obviously Pokemon continues to release generation after generation of games, right? So you have Game Boy Advance games, and then Nintendo DS games, and 3DS games, and now Switch games. But until the Switch, they had all been primarily handheld games. Obviously, alongside that, you still have all of the merchandising. You still have movies coming out. You still have new seasons of anime happening. They have occasional little pop-ups pretending to be theme parks that are like, oh, we'll have a theme park, but only for 3 months. And all of this leads up into now where Pokemon as a franchise continues to be all of those things, plus soon to be an actual for real theme park that will be there forever. At least that's what they say. Pokemon Park Kanto, which I think is in the works right now. Simultaneously, I think more specifically during the Nintendo Switch era, and it helps to have been doing a video game podcast the entire time this has been happening, but during the Nintendo Switch era, I think that jump from handheld Pokemon games to what the Switch is, which is the hybrid console, but technically a home console also, I think set a lot of expectations in the minds of people in terms of what they wanted out of the video games. And Game Freak, generally speaking, the Pokemon Company, have not managed to meet those expectations for almost all of those releases. There is a higher level thought to have, which is that Pokemon games have always been a way of ushering new generations of kids into the fold, right? Yeah. They don't need to get me. I'm already here. But they do need to teach a new generation of kids why Pokemon is cool and interesting and something you would want to get into. And that's where new generations of Pokemon games really are pointing at every time they're released in the first place. So from that perspective, kids are enjoying all of these games, and they are absolutely selling gangbusters every single time. You would not get that impression from like hanging out online. And I imagine if you're listening to this or watching this, you probably already know this, but like the online Pokemon fan base is vehemently toxic. Like it's about as poisonous as it gets. And a lot of the reason I think starts with that slow ramp into disappointment during the Nintendo Switch era, because exactly what I was talking about the anime in regards to that idea of like, I have this vision of what Pokemon can be in my head, and the anime is showing it to me. You think by the time you get to a home console version of Pokemon, they start to take that fantasy realization aspect of the anime and incorporating it into video games, especially considering we've seen other video games do it. Yeah. That's where video games actually thrive, as it turns out, is allowing you to live experiences you could never have. So when that starts to not happen in the video games on the Nintendo Switch, you have this entire cohort of people on the internet rallying against Game Freak in particular as the developers, because, actually a big piece of the secrecy of Nintendo, you know this better than I do, but a big part of the secrecy of Nintendo and the way they make games in general, and the way the entire industry makes games in general, that secrecy has basically led to a complete lack of knowledge from like the layman video game player in terms of how video games are made. So when you have this disconnect between people who don't understand how games are made and the business behind them, and also the thing they're looking forward to is disappointing or quote unquote not for them, it leads to exactly what happened with Roger Ebert, which is that people won't stop emailing Game Freak about how terrible they are because they made a game that they don't like. And that's when I say you have to zoom out. That's my kind of holistic view of Pokemon as a franchise, is you have to zoom out and just understand what these games are for, and understand that because they are coming from a down to, again, the DNA level, a capitalist place, all they need to do is onboard new kids into the Pokemon world. And as long as they do that, it doesn't matter what the budgets for these games are. And it doesn't matter how little time they give these developers. As long as it still accomplishes that goal, that's fine by the Pokemon Company. And that's what they've done time and time again. And like when the games are decent, it's a miracle. And when the games are bad, it's not a surprise, is kind of my feeling about it.
Yeah. What has helped me appreciate this, and I've listened to you talk about Pokemon for more hours than I've listened to most people talk about anything, is you're familiar with the Yoshi games that are for kids, right?
Yes.
And the budgets that go into Yoshi games, and they make people love Yoshi. And nobody's out here complaining about the quality of the Yoshi game. If anything, they're like delightfully surprised when it's good. And I feel like the problem for Pokemon is what its purpose is a very elevated version of the Yoshi game. It is a game meant for what they think kids are into. It is meant to be formulaic because it is a formula that I think appeals to the way kids' brains works. And anything more complicated than that makes it an adult game, and they're not making an adult game. That said, on the flip side, we have Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which I think is the thing that we're all like asking for as fans, which is like that Head Out thing was made for kids, and then you made one of the sickest games of the entire generation.
Yeah. It's a best of all world scenario. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I agree with you. Do you still follow like any of the anime or movies or any of that stuff?
No, I've kind of fallen off of everything except for the games at this point. Every once in a while.
Make you mad?
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, let me make this very clear because I haven't said this explicitly, but yeah. I am not one of the people who is angry online about Pokemon. I think I find myself to be very level-headed about it. I think by comparison, I like most of the games. Like I enjoy most of the games. I can understand I played Scarlet and Violet and I was like, this game doesn't actually work very well on the Nintendo Switch. And that's kind of embarrassing. But I still played like 30 to 40 hours of it. Like I still enjoyed it enough to do so. But I'm not one of those people who's like going online and yelling at, people on the internet about the tree textures or something. Like I'm never going to get on that level. That having been said, I've kind of bowed out of basically everything except for the games because I personally feel that in literally the past like 3-ish to 4 years, the Pokemon Company has started to get a little bit more introspective and interesting when it comes to how they're making their video games. Point specifically at this trifecta of Pokemon Legends Arceus, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and Pokemon Legends ZA being these 3 games that to me feel like a company that is finally understanding what it did on the 3DS era, which is like people are kind of getting tired of our BS and we need to shape up a little bit and try some more interesting stuff. And they're trying more interesting stuff. And it's not landing always, but it does land sometimes. And that's, always going to be more interesting. Pokemon Legends Arceus is a game I always point at as a game about living in a society. It takes place way in the past, for those of you who haven't played it. But it's a game about being transported back to a time in the Pokemon world where people were afraid of Pokemon. And you as an individual need to teach people why Pokemon are like cool and helpful to society and worth living alongside instead of running in fear from. And that's a bold thing to do from your gigantic, biggest intellectual property on Earth video game, to say these things are scary and we need to overcome that. And most companies who are this controlling of their intellectual property would never put themselves in a position where you could have a character on screen saying this thing that is the most important mascot to our entire empire is frightening.
Yeah.
That would never happen. So the idea that they have done that once and then again with ZA, asking different questions in ZA, I think is a bold direction and speaks to me, or at least tells me that the Pokemon Company is interested in asking bigger questions and kind of expanding their reach a little bit more outside of just these games are for kids and that's it.
I really want a total conversion mod of Arceus now that just sets it in Des Moines in 1996. And it's like a bunch of like parents and preachers being like, these things are scary. And like,
yeah.
Oh, it's just...
You play as a kid who needs to like show them how to play the card game. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be adorable. Before we wrap up, you have a bottomless well of video game recommendations. You already mentioned Boku no Natsuyasumi. Can you give some other games that you think people would enjoy if they listen to this and they hear this origin story of Pokemon and they're like, that sounds great. That game that you're describing sounds awesome. It's obviously become a very different thing. So like what would you point them to?
Yeah, I would say the first place I would point people to is the extremely rich Pokemon game modding community. The Pokemon ROM hack community is fascinating and is actually getting more and more impressive year by year. as these huge community efforts kind of rally around building like game engines that people can build their own Pokemon games within. So I would point people towards probably the most recent release that has a lot of people flipping out, which is called Pokemon Lazarus.
Yeah.
It's a ROM hack of Pokemon Emerald, which takes place in an entirely new region, entirely new art style, new characters, new everything, and is a beautiful, beautiful game. One of the best games I played this year, honestly, is this Game Boy Advance fan-made Pokemon game. Outside of that, if you're like, I'm interested in the idea of Pokemon, but I don't know if I want to be playing Pokemon right now, I think the game that has been the most surprising to me this year in particular that will scratch that same itch is, believe it or not, Digimon. The history of Digimon games, you could do a whole other episode about. Digimon in general is like a fascinating kind of counter to Pokemon. But the game side of things, I personally feel has always been lacking. Like it's always been very, very, very hit or miss. Mostly very, very miss. But Digimon Story Time Stranger, their most recent game, undeniable hit. It's a great video game, and I think will give people a lot of what they're interested in from what Pokemon could be in a Digimon package, which I find fascinating. And then, honestly, Dragon Quest, man. Like, I think Dragon Quest, it's kind of the nexus point for, like, everything for a lot of people, including Pokemon, as it turns out.
I love that you just have literally not just the slime that you were polishing, but there's one behind, looming behind the entire conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the interesting things that I didn't come up in the history recap, but at the time that they're making Pokemon, Dragon Quest V is released also. Dragon Quest V is the first one where you can capture monsters. So these monsters that Yuji Horii and Akira Toriyama are cooking up, you can start to capture them and add them to your party as well. And Dragon Quest V is also one of the best narratives in an RPG ever written. So, hey, go play that on the Nintendo DS. It's really good. Those are the three games I'd probably call out right now. I mean, you could get into like Persona and other RPGs and stuff, but the thing that I would impress upon people who are interested, at least in the Pokemon games, is like, go play the ones you haven't played also, because there's a good chance one of them might end up being your favorite. I think we're long past the days of Game Freak being the company that's at the forefront of technology for handheld gaming. I feel like the third generation was kind of the last time they were that. But there's still a lot of good in most of those games, if not all of them, and give them all a shot. There's probably one you haven't played all the way through.
There's an idea that Brendan mentioned here, dear listener, to use his phrase, that there could be an entire history episode about Digimon. I just say that if you think that sounds like a good idea, you should tell Brendan to do that on Wavelengths. Have me be the guest so I can learn about this thing that I truly nothing about. Yeah. I'm just saying those are the sort of creator crossover collabs, man.
This is how you get the Pokemon Company.
This is exactly it. We are truly the game freaks. Hey, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you letting me yap at you about all the old days of Pokemon.
This was delightful. Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time.
I'm glad you're feeling better, too.
Thank you. Me too. Oh, my God.
Where should people go listen to you?
Yeah, head over to wavelengths.online. That's my link for basically everything. You can find Into the Aether there, and Wavelengths, the YouTube channel, and the podcast, and NPC, and everything.
The thing that you will find about Wavelengths, on top of it just being great, is that Brendan, I don't know, has like 36 hours in a day, unlike the rest of us who have 24. And that's the only justification for how much stuff is made and the quality level. I truly don't understand it.
That's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
It's unnerving. Oh, it's not a compliment. It's a threat.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's nice.
Classic way to end a podcast, threatening your guest by saying menacing nice things about their work. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. It would not be possible without the people who are listening to this right now. So thank you, and please keep it up. And that's it. This has been another episode of Post Games, kind of the monthly bonus thing. And if you'd like to, let me know, and maybe we'll do more in the future. With that, he is Brendan Bigley. I am Chris Plant. We'll see you later.
Go catch them all, everybody.